The conference room at the opulent Riverside Tower hummed with an undercurrent of palpable tension, the kind that builds in high-stakes environments where fortunes are made or shattered in the span of a single signature, with crystal chandeliers suspended overhead, casting intricate patterns of golden flecks that danced across the surface of the long, polished oak table, like fleeting illusions of wealth and security, while a dozen executives clad in impeccably tailored suits leaned forward in their leather chairs, their faces etched with a meticulously curated mix of eager anticipation and feigned deference, each one acutely aware of the power dynamics at play. As at the head of the table sat Khalid al-Mansour, the enigmatic billionaire oil magnate whose vast empire stretched across continents from the sun-baked deserts of the Middle East to the bustling financial hubs of Europe and Asia, his presence alone commanding the room like an unspoken decree, his voice emerging smooth and authoritative, laced with the subtle cadence of authority honed over decades of negotiations that had toppled governments and built dynasties as he seamlessly switched to a rare and intricate Arabic dialect, one not commonly heard in these Western boardrooms, to outline what he presented as the final clause of a monumental investment deal with Western global partners, his words flowing with calculated precision. With this adjustment for regional variances he intoned in that dialect, his tone carrying an air of benign assurance while embedding a layer of subtle ambiguity that only those versed in the nuances of linguistic subtlety would detect, we ensure flexibility in oversight. Yet beneath the surface, those words harbored a far more insidious implication, a cleverly disguised backdoor mechanism that could over time erode Weston's autonomy and grant al-Mansour unilateral control over their assets, potentially stripping the American firm of its hard-earned holdings under the guise of mere procedural adjustments. And, as the room responded with blank nods of apparent agreement, the translators hunched over their notepads, scribbling furiously, but failing to grasp the full weight of the deception, their interpretations sanitized and incomplete, none among them catching the underlying trap that lurked within the phrasing, a trap designed to exploit cultural and linguistic gaps for maximum advantage. From the shadows pressed against the far wall where the ambient light barely reached, stood Aisha Thompson, her silver tray balanced expertly in her hands, laden with chilled bottles of water and delicate glassware, her uniform starched and crisp to perfection, every fold and seam, a testament to the invisible labor that kept such opulent spaces functioning seamlessly. Her posture ramrod straight and deliberately unassuming, trained over months of service to blend into the background like a piece of elegant furniture to become part of the scenery rather than a participant in it. Aisha, a black woman in her mid-30s, with sharp features and eyes that held depths of untold stories, had once navigated a very different world, thriving amid the glittering skyscrapers of Dubai's elite financial districts, armed with a prestigious degree in global economics from a top university and an effortless fluency in multiple Arabic dialects, inherited from her Somali heritage dialects. She had honed through immersive experiences in bustling markets and high-level boardrooms alike, where she had analyzed risk assessments for multi-million-dollar Gulf funds, dissecting contracts with the precision of a surgeon, identifying vulnerabilities that could make or break empires. But life, with its unpredictable cruelties, had derailed that trajectory in ways she could never have foreseen. A sudden family crisis, the kind that strikes without warning and upends everything, had pulled her back to her homeland, forcing her to abandon her promising career abroad, to care for an ailing relative. And, upon her return, the harsh realities of the job market had revealed themselves in full force, with resume gaps scrutinized unfairly, subtle biases whispering doubts about her qualifications based on her appearance and background. Doors that once swung open now slamming shut, leaving her with no choice but to take on roles far below her capabilities, serving refreshments in the very rooms where decisions of global consequence were made. Rooms where she observed silently, absorbing every word, every gesture, her mind, a silent repository of knowledge that no one suspected, lay hidden behind her unassuming facade. The words Al-Mansur had just uttered hit her like an electric jolt, slicing through the veil of her enforced invisibility, their true meaning crystallizing in her thoughts with alarming clarity. And without a moment's further hesitation, she set down the tray with a soft, deliberate clink that seemed to echo louder than it should in the suddenly charged atmosphere, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat of defiance, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins as she stepped forward into the light, crossing the invisible boundary that separated servers from decision-makers. "Excuse me, Mr. Al-Mansur," she said clearly and without tremor, her voice cutting through the room like a blade of truth, steady and resonant despite the storm brewing within her. And in that instant, the entire room froze as if time itself had paused, heads whipping around in synchronized shock, some executives blinking in outright disbelief at the audacity of this interruption from an unexpected quarter, others narrowing their eyes in confusion or irritation, unsure how to process the breach of protocol by someone they had barely registered as present, let alone capable of such insight. Al-Mansur's piercing eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his otherwise impassive features as he switched fluidly back to English, his tone sharp, yet composed, betraying a hint of intrigue beneath the surface. "You speak this dialect?" he queried, testing the waters, and Aisha, unflinching under the weight of a dozen startled gazes that bore into her like spotlights, replied without missing a beat in the same precise Arabic dialect he had employed, her words measured and confident. "Yes, and I recognize when words mask intent, this clause isn't protective, it's predatory. A override mechanism hidden in compliance language that would hand you retroactive authority over all decisions, effectively stripping Weston of control." And as her explanation hung in the air, gasps rippled through the assembly like a wave. A Weston partner sputtering indignantly from his seat, his face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and outrage. "Who is she? This is outrageous. Call security." "Nay." His voice rising in pitch, echoing the collective discomfort of those unaccustomed to being challenged from below. But Al-Mansur, ever the strategist, held up a single hand in a gesture of command that silenced the room instantly, his gaze locking onto Aisha with an intensity that spoke of re-evaluation, studying her as one might appraise a rare artifact unexpectedly unearthed. "You understand contracts." He pressed his curiosity now, fully piqued, and Aisha, drawing on the wellspring of her expertise, responded steadily still in Arabic to underscore her command of the language and the culture it represented. "I have a background in international economics, worked in risk assessment for Gulf funds before circumstances changed and brought me here." Her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had once commanded respect in similar arenas, though now cloaked in humility. The billionaire's composure, that unshakable facade of quiet arrogance built over years of unchallenged dominance, cracked ever so slightly. A fleeting second of vulnerability that he quickly masked as he turned sharply to his aide, the translator who had been seated nearby, now visibly sweating under the scrutiny. "Verify her claim," Al-Mansur ordered curtly, and the translator, his face paling as he reviewed his notes, admitted with a stammer that he had indeed missed the nuanced implication his oversight now laid bare for all to see. The meeting, which had been barreling toward a swift conclusion, came to an abrupt halt, the air thick with whispers that buzzed like static electricity. "She's just the maid," one executive muttered under his breath, his tone dripping with disdain. "How dare she interrupt like this?" Another chimed in their voices a chorus of entitlement that revealed more about their prejudices than about Aisha's actions, yet amid the murmurs one Weston executive, Elena Vargas, the firm's sharp-eyed vice president with a reputation for pragmatic diplomacy, intervened with a voice of reason, leaning back in her chair and addressing the group. "Perhaps we should clarify before proceeding. Her point merits examination." Her words carrying weight enough to shift the momentum slightly, prompting a reluctant pause. Al-Mansur, after a moment of contemplative silence, nodded curtly, a subtle acknowledgement that dismissed his faltering translator with a wave, sending the man scurrying out in humiliation, while Aisha stood firm her stance, unwavering, despite the internal whirlwind of doubt and determination warring within her, her mind flashing back to her grandmother's tales of resilience passed down through generations, stories of ancestors who had stood against injustice in dusty villages far from these glass towers, tales that had instilled in her a core of unyielding strength. By the end of the disrupted session, the contentious clause had been flagged for immediate revision, the deal's trajectory altered by her intervention, and though Al-Mansur offered no overt thanks, no public accolade as he gathered his papers and prepared to leave, he leaned in slightly and murmured in a tone audible only to her, "Not many dare speak truth here. You have my attention." A statement that carried the weight of potential alliance or scrutiny, leaving Aisha to ponder its implications as she exited the room and made her way back to the staff quarters. The adrenaline that had fueled her boldness, now ebbing away, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that settled over her like a heavy cloak. Her supervisor, Mr. Hale, a stern man with a perpetual scowl etched into his features from years of managing the unseen workforce, waited there, fuming, his arms crossed tightly over his chest as he launched into a tirade without preamble. "You could have cost us the entire contract with that stunt. Upper management is absolutely livid, demanding explanations." His voice laced with frustration, born of fear for his own position. But before Aisha could muster a defense explaining that her interruption had stemmed from a place of ethical imperative rather than recklessness, Elena Vargas appeared in the doorway, her presence unexpected and commanding, cutting through the tension like a knife. "She saved it, actually, Miss Thompson. Your insight was invaluable, and we'd like you to review the full draft before we reconvene." Her words hanging in the air as an olive branch extended from the world above to the one below, leaving Mr. Hale sputtering in surprise, his authority momentarily undercut. Aisha blinked, stunned by the rapid turn of events, her mind reeling as she nodded in acceptance, and that night, back in her modest apartment on the city's outskirts, where the walls were thin and the street lights filtered through cracked blinds, she pored over the emailed documents by the dim glow of a single lamp, her fingers tracing lines of legalese, with the familiarity of an old habit, her late mother's pendant dangling around her neck like a talisman of endurance, a simple silver piece engraved with a Somali proverb about the power of unspoken wisdom, and as she flagged additional ambiguities, subtle phrasings that could lead to exploitative loopholes, she felt a spark reignite within her, a sense of purpose, long dormant now, stirring to life, making her feel truly visible for the first time in years. No longer just a shadow in the margins, but a force capable of reshaping narratives. The next day, the renegotiations resumed with Aisha, present not as peripheral staff, but as a provisional consultant, dressed in borrowed professional attire that felt both foreign and fitting a conservative blouse, and slacks that lent her an air of authority she had almost forgotten she possessed. And, as she navigated the discussions, bridging cultural gaps with precise translations and incisive commentary, Al-Mansur tested her mettle with probing questions, his demeanor a blend of skepticism and subtle respect. Yet her responses, grounded in expertise and unflinching honesty, earned gradual nods from around the table, the atmosphere shifting from hostility to a tentative alliance. By afternoon, after hours of back and forth that peeled away layers of deception and rebuilt the framework on firmer ground, a fair and equitable deal was struck, one that protected all parties without hidden pitfalls, and Elena, impressed by Aisha's poise under pressure, extended an offer for a temporary role within Weston. "You've got the eye for this. Join us in oversight." Her words opening a door that Aisha stepped through with cautious optimism, her world irrevocably shifting from the anonymity of carrying trays to claiming a seat at the tables of power, where decisions echoed far beyond the room. Yet even in this moment of triumph, shadows lingered on the periphery, subtle whispers among the Weston staff, hinting at deeper unspoken issues. Funds mysteriously vanishing in past deals, anomalies that no one had dared probe too closely, and, as Aisha overheard a junior analyst muttering in the hallway, if she digs too far, she'll uncover more than she bargains for. A chill ran down her spine, a premonition that her intervention had set in motion forces beyond the immediate negotiation, that the echo of her voice, once silent, had just begun to ripple through the hidden corridors of deceit and intrigue that threaded through the corporate underbelly, promising challenges yet to come, but also the potential for profound change. Weeks into her newfound consulting role at Weston Global Partners, Aisha Thompson found herself ensconced in a sleek modern office, perched high above the city's relentless pulse, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the skyline that stretched out like a tapestry of ambition and anonymity, far removed from the dimly lit service elevators and echoing hallways of the Riverside Tower, where her journey had so dramatically begun her days, now a whirlwind of meticulous contract audits and strategic briefings that demanded every ounce of her analytical prowess. Yet, as the initial thrill of recognition faded into the grind of routine, an undercurrent of unease began to weave its way into her nights, manifesting in the form of anonymous notes slipped under her office door or tucked into her mailbox at home, cryptic warnings scrawled in block letters that urged her to stay in her lane or risk consequences unspecified but ominously implied. Notes she initially dismissed as the petty jealousies of colleagues resentful of her rapid ascent from obscurity to influence, choosing instead to channel her energy into delving deeper into Weston's vast digital archives at the behest of Elena Vargas, who had become both mentor and confidant, tasking Aisha with cross-referencing past deals for patterns that might hint at inefficiencies or oversights. One fateful evening, as the office lights dimmed and the city outside transitioned into a glittering sea of nocturnal activity, Aisha sat hunched over her computer screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she navigated through layers of encrypted files and forgotten databases, her eyes narrowing in concentration until she stumbled upon a series of glaring discrepancies that sent a chill racing down her spine. Millions of dollars earmarked for critical African infrastructure projects, funds intended to build sustainable roads and water systems in remote villages plagued by poverty and neglect, had been mysteriously rerouted through a labyrinth of obscure subsidiaries and shell companies labeled under innocuous headings like administrative reallocations or contingency reserves. But upon closer inspection, these transfers revealed themselves as something far more sinister: deliberate embezzlement designed to siphon resources away from their intended recipients and into private pockets. Her pulse quickening with a mix of outrage and determination as she traced the digital breadcrumbs, uncovering how the money looped through offshore banks in the Caymans, bouncing like shadows in a hall of mirrors, before landing in luxury real estate holdings and yacht purchases linked directly to Weston insiders, names that appeared repeatedly in the transaction logs. Chief among them, Victor Lang, a slick and ambitious board member known for his flashy lifestyle and shadowy connections to Al-Mansour's geopolitical rivals, who had buried the evidence deep within encrypted servers, assuming no one would connect the dots. Her mind raced back to her time in Dubai, where she had honed her skills in spotting such financial sleights of hand patterns that mirrored the manipulative tactics she had exposed in that fateful meeting. But this was on a grander scale, not just a contractual trap, but a systemic betrayal that robbed communities of hope and progress, villages left without the promised lifelines, while executives indulged in excess. And, with a steadying breath, she compiled her findings into a secure report, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of moral imperative, before confiding in Elena the very next morning in a hushed corner of the executive lounge, where the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the tension in the air. Elena's face paling as she reviewed the evidence, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We've suspected leaks for months, whispers of budgets not adding up. But this is outright theft. We need irrefutable proof before we act, or they'll bury us in denials and lawsuits. And together, under the guise of routine compliance checks, they embarked on a covert investigation. Aisha leveraging her expertise in financial modeling to crack the intricate patterns using algorithms she had developed in her previous life to map out the flow of funds, revealing how Lang had orchestrated the diversions with the help of complicit accountants who forged approvals and backdated records to cover their tracks. But as their probe deepened, the perils of their pursuit became increasingly apparent. The anonymous notes escalating into more tangible threats late one night, as Aisha made her way home through the rain-slicked streets, her umbrella doing little to shield her from the downpour or the prickling sensation of being watched. She sensed footsteps echoing hers, a persistent shadow that quickened her pace and set her heart hammering against her ribs. Until she reached her apartment building and bolted inside only to find upon entering her unit that nothing was amiss. Yet the paranoia lingered like a fog, prompting her to install extra locks and vary her routes. But the real blow came when she discovered her computer at work had been tampered with, files she had been analyzing mysteriously corrupted, forcing her to rely on backups she had wisely stored on an external drive hidden in her bag. Undeterred, Elena arranged for reinforcements in the form of Marcus Hale, a grizzled retired investigator with no familial ties to her former supervisor, but a shared surname that elicited a wry smile from Aisha Marcus, a veteran of countless corporate scandals with a network of contacts in forensics and cybersecurity, his weathered face and no-nonsense demeanor instilling a sense of security as he joined their clandestine team poring over the recovered data in a dimly lit cafe far from the office. Away from prying eyes and potential surveillance, where he uncovered even more damning evidence, internal emails, where Lang boasted subtly about optimizing allocations to his accomplices, including a Weston lawyer who had drafted the misleading documents, communications that painted a picture of greed, unchecked by conscience. "This goes higher than you think," Marcus warned in his gravelly voice, puffing on an unlit cigar, as was his habit. Exposing it could topple not just careers but entire alliances. Lang's ties run deep to factions that don't play fair, his words a sobering reminder of the risks they were courting. Yet Aisha's resolve only hardened, fueled by vivid memories of her own community's struggles back home, where corrupt deals from afar had exacerbated local hardships, leaving families without basic necessities, while distant moguls profited a cycle she was determined to break, no matter the cost. With the evidence mounting, Aisha proposed a bold move to confront Khalid al-Mansour, directly arguing that his firm's peripheral involvement in some of the diverted projects made him a potential ally, his resources and influence crucial in dismantling the scheme before it spiraled further. But Elena hesitated, her brow furrowing in concern. "He's become an ally since your intervention, but this could implicate elements within his own network. Rival factions might be using Weston as a proxy to undermine him." A valid point that gave Aisha pause, yet her intuition urged her forward, and, after careful deliberation, she scheduled a discreet meeting, through back channels arranging to meet al-Mansour in a private lounge at a neutral venue, a high-end club where discretion was the unspoken currency. Upon arrival, the atmosphere thick with the scent of aged leather and cigar smoke, Aisha presented her compiled dossier, with steady hands walking him through the revelations, line by line, her voice calm but insistent as she highlighted the rerouted funds and their devastating impacts. Al-Mansour's face, darkening with each page, turned a storm brewing in his eyes as he absorbed the betrayal not just of trust, but of the humanitarian ethos he publicly championed. "Betrayal from within my sphere." He muttered, his voice a low rumble of controlled fury, "and orchestrated by those who seek to weaken me," confirming Aisha's suspicions of broader geopolitical intrigue, where rival magnates vied for dominance in the oil-rich regions using financial sabotage as their weapon of choice. Moved by the evidence and, perhaps, by Aisha's unyielding integrity, al-Mansour committed to a joint audit, tasking her with leading the effort and providing access to his own records for cross-verification, a partnership that elevated her role yet again. But back at Weston, the tensions ratcheted up exponentially. Victor Lang cornering her in a deserted hallway one afternoon, his polished veneer cracking to reveal the venom beneath. "You think a maid-turned-meddler can play detective in my world? Back off now, or you'll regret crossing paths you don't understand." His words laced with menace, his proximity invasive. But Aisha stood her ground, meeting his gaze with unflinching resolve. "I see clearer from the ground up than you ever could from your ivory tower. Truth doesn't care about titles." Her retort sharp and unyielding, leaving him seething as he stormed away. But the encounter only fueled her vigilance, knowing that such confrontations were harbingers of greater storms. The audit progressed amid escalating sabotage, key files vanishing from servers overnight, access codes inexplicably changed, forcing Aisha and her allies to work in shifts using encrypted channels and off-site backups to safeguard their progress. And with Marcus's expertise, they recovered deleted communications that sealed the case irrefutable proof of Lang's orchestration, including timestamps that aligned with suspicious market moves benefiting his hidden allies. One stormy night, as thunder rolled across the city like distant artillery, Aisha returned to her apartment to find it ransacked drawers, upended her belongings strewn about in a chaotic display of intimidation. Her laptop smashed on the floor, but, crucially, the external drives containing the core evidence were safe, having been stashed in a locker at a nearby gym as a precaution. The violation leaving her shaken, but not broken, prompting her to relocate temporarily to a safe house arranged by Marcus, where she continued her work under the cover of anonymity. Elena, sensing the mounting danger, rallied a small but loyal alliance of ethical staff within Weston junior analysts and mid-level managers, disillusioned with the corruption they had witnessed, forming a network that provided tips and additional data, strengthening their position as they prepared to present preliminary findings to Weston's board in a high-stakes session that could either vindicate them or expose them to retaliation. The boardroom crackled with anticipation as Aisha laid out the evidence, her presentation, methodical and compelling charts illustrating the fund flows and emails projected on the screen, sparking chaos among the members. Denials from Lang's supporters, gasps from the uninvolved, and a palpable shift as the weight of proof became undeniable. Lang himself denying everything with feigned indignation, his voice rising in protest. But Aisha's testimony, delivered with the calm authority of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to gain for justice, swayed the doubters. These aren't abstract numbers. They're lives, stolen communities left in darkness, while a few line their pockets. Her words resonating like a clarion call. And with Al-Mansour joining via secure video link to endorse her findings and pledge cooperation, the tide turned decisively, leading to Lang's immediate suspension pending full investigation, a victory that tasted bittersweet amid the whispered threats that still echoed in the halls. "This isn't over," one of his allies hissed as the meeting adjourned, a reminder that shadows of deception rarely dissipate without a fight. Aisha emerged from the ordeal stronger, her role expanding into full-time risk oversight, empowered to implement safeguards against future fraud. Yet she knew deep down that the shadows hid more layers, perhaps ties to international syndicates that extended beyond Weston and into the murky waters of global rivalries. And as she stood by her window that evening, gazing out at the city lights twinkling like distant stars, her mother's pendant warm against her skin, she vowed to illuminate every dark corner, one relentless revelation at a time. Her path now irrevocably set toward uncovering the full extent of the web, no matter where it led or what dangers it unearthed. Months after the seismic exposures that had rocked Weston Global Partners to its core, Aisha Thompson stood firmly at the helm of the newly established Integrity Division, a groundbreaking initiative forged in the fires of the scandals she had painstakingly unearthed, transforming what could have been a mere footnote in corporate history into a beacon for ethical overhaul across the industry. Her office now, a command center buzzing with activity walls lined with whiteboards scrawled in multicolored markers, detailing reform strategies and global outreach plans, far from the solitary audits of her early days as she chaired weekly ethics councils comprised of diverse voices, legal experts from varied continents, community advocates from grassroots organizations, and even reformed insiders who had turned whistleblower after witnessing the fallout, implementing sweeping reforms that went beyond mere policy tweaks to embed transparency at every level, mandating real-time public audits for all major deals, community veto rights in projects affecting local populations, and mandatory ethics training modules infused with real-world case studies drawn from the very frauds she had exposed, ensuring that no transaction could proceed without multi-layered scrutiny designed to prevent the kind of diversions that had once siphoned millions into shadows. Her first major test of this new framework unfolded in the lush rainforested landscapes of Brazil, where a proposed hydroelectric project threatened to displace indigenous groups whose ancestral lands held not just homes, but sacred histories woven into the earth itself, prompting Aisha to board a flight southward, her suitcase packed with binders of preliminary assessments and a resolve steeled by the knowledge that failure here could undermine the entire division's credibility. Upon arrival, she assembled a coalition of local leaders, environmental engineers with mud-stained boots from years in the field, municipal auditors skeptical of foreign interventions, and representatives from tribal councils adorned in traditional regalia that spoke of unbroken lineages holding workshops in community centers, where the air hummed with the sounds of indigenous languages and the aroma of freshly brewed mate, declaring with unwavering conviction, power isn't just about generating energy, it's about empowering those who have been powerless, ensuring that progress lifts all without erasing any. As she adapted her models to incorporate tribal input on fund allocation, weaving in clauses for ongoing consultation and profit sharing that tied corporate gains directly to community benefits, metrics meticulously crafted to track not only environmental impacts like water quality and biodiversity preservation, but also social indicators such as health improvements and cultural heritage safeguards, turning what could have been a flashpoint of conflict into a model of collaborative success, with the project redesigned to minimize displacement through innovative rerouting and compensatory land grants, earning accolades from international watchdogs, who hailed it as a paradigm shift in sustainable development. Back in the bustling nerve center of Weston, however, resistance simmered like an undercurrent in a seemingly calm river, former allies of Victor Lang launching subtle campaigns to discredit her efforts, lobbying behind closed doors against what they derided as overreach that stifled innovation, leaking selective smears to sympathetic media outlets, portraying Aisha as an outsider meddling in proven business practices, headlines questioning her credentials and motives in thinly veiled attempts to erode her support base. But Aisha countered with a series of public forums broadcast live across digital platforms, sharing unfiltered stories of the reclaimed funds now restoring vitality to African villages, schools erected where none had stood, wells drilled to provide clean water that quenched generations-old thirsts, and solar grids illuminating homes that had long dwelt in darkness. Her narratives humanizing the abstract drawing crowds of engaged citizens and investors alike, who began to demand similar accountability from other firms, with Elena amplifying her message through strategic alliances with NGOs and thought leaders declaring in joint press releases she's not disrupting for disruption's sake. She's delivering justice that sustains both profits and principles, a mantra that gradually shifted public sentiment in their favor. Emboldened by these early victories, Khalid al-Mansour extended an invitation for Aisha to his opulent headquarters in Dubai, a sprawling complex of glass and steel rising like a mirage from the desert sands, where she presented the comprehensive Light Charter, a meticulously drafted framework for ethical investing that outlined protocols for traceability in supply chains, equity in partnerships, and restitution mechanisms for past harms standing before a summit of delegates from Europe, Africa, and Asia. In a grand auditorium echoing with multilingual translations, her voice resonant as she wove in proverbs from her Somali heritage about the strength found in communal light against solitary darkness, bridging Eastern philosophies of balance with Western demands for rigor captivating the audience such that one prominent CEO, previously skeptical, admitted publicly, "We needed this wake-up call. Your charter isn't just rules, it's a roadmap to redemption." Sparking commitments from multiple firms to pilot the charter in their operations, a domino effect that rippled outward with tangible results, like reduced corruption indices in participating regions. Personal triumphs intertwined seamlessly with these professional milestones, culminating in the unveiling of a commemorative plaque at the Riverside Tower's lobby. A gleaming brass testament to her inaugural stand against deception, inscribed with the poignant words, "From silence to strength," honoring the voice that illuminated truth. Attended by a diverse gathering, including Carmen from her hotel days, who approached with tears in her eyes and a warm embrace, whispering, "You didn't just light a fire, you sparked a blaze that warms us all." While threats from the old guard faded into irrelevance, as legal proceedings mounted against Lang and his cohorts, their convictions secured through the ironclad evidence Aisha had compiled with seized assets redirected toward restitution funds that compensated affected communities, turning ill-gotten gains into seeds of renewal. The charter's influence expanded globally like veins of light piercing through clouds, with pilots in India curbing exploitative labor practices in textile factories by enforcing fair wage audits and worker representation on oversight boards in Europe, exposing and dismantling greenwashing schemes that had falsely touted environmental credentials, while polluting waterways, each initiative tailored to local contexts, yet unified by the Charter's core principles, fostering a network of integrity advocates who shared best practices through virtual summits and collaborative databases. Aisha herself mentoring a cadre of young professionals, particularly women of color, from underrepresented backgrounds, establishing scholarships in her mother's name to fund education in ethics and economics. Programs that drew applicants from around the world eager to carry forward the torch she had ignited. Reflecting on this transformative arc during a quiet visit to her family's old neighborhood where the streets once echoed with the struggles of economic disparity, now buzzed with renewed vitality from community projects she had indirectly inspired. Aisha wandered familiar paths, greeting old neighbors who shared stories of improved livelihoods. Children who aspired beyond the horizons of their parents, a profound sense of continuity washing over her as she realized her efforts honored not just her own path, but the unspoken legacies of those who had paved the way before her. In a culminating address to Weston's expanded board, now inclusive of community representatives as per the Charter's mandates, Aisha declared with quiet power, "Integrity isn't a static policy etched in stone, it's a living promise we keep daily. A commitment that evolves with every challenge met and every voice amplified." Her words met with nods from Al-Mansour himself, who responded via hologram from Dubai, his tone laced with genuine admiration. "You didn't merely reply in that room, you redefined the entire conversation, turning whispers of doubt into roars of reform." A sentiment that encapsulated the essence of her journey as she looked toward the horizon of future endeavors. The world appearing brighter and more interconnected, Aisha knew her light would endure a perpetual glow, inspiring echoes in every overlooked voice, ready to rise, weaving a tapestry of accountability that spanned continents and generations, ensuring that the legacy of light she had kindled would illuminate paths long after her own steps had faded into memory.